If World War III truly begins, you will not recognize it on the battlefield first. You will recognize it in your own kitchen. Everything will still look normal. The supermarket is still open. The lights are still on. The music is still playing. But the things you always believed would always exist begin to disappear very slowly. So slowly that most people do not notice in time until it is too late to prepare. The great wars in history rarely made the world collapse in a single night. They break supply chains, make food become scarce, and change human life from the quietest places. A true crisis does not begin when shelves are empty. It begins when you still have money, but the system no longer sells you the life you are used to. And when that happens, the most important question will not be where the world is heading, but what you have left to live through the days ahead. Today, we are not talking about fear. We are talking about time. 13 foods that can last longer than war, longer than disruption. And in some very quiet moment, they may become the final boundary between calm and panic. 1. Rice. Most families believe they already have enough food at home. But if the supply chain stops for only 3 weeks, most kitchen cabinets will begin to empty faster than they expect. Not because of immediate war, not because supermarkets close overnight, but because almost everything we buy each week is designed to spoil before it is truly needed. The expiration date printed on the packaging looks like a promise of safety, but in a crisis, it is only a very quiet countdown clock. History shows that societies rarely collapse with a loud explosion. They collapse slowly, until people realize that what they believed was stable was actually more fragile than they ever imagined. And when transportation stops, when shelves are no longer refilled each night, the most important question is no longer what you like to eat. It is, what in your kitchen will last long enough to keep you alive? Throughout the span of human history, from ancient civilizations to the most crowded modern cities, there has always been one food quietly standing behind the survival of billions of people. White rice. Not luxurious, not special, not something people remember in beautiful meals. But when everything else disappears one by one, rice remains, silent, enduring, almost untouched by time. When stored properly, white rice can last for decades while barely losing its core nutritional value. And on the day the world no longer operates as it once did, what determines how long you endure is not the food you like, but the food that remains when everything else has disappeared. It is not war that causes people to fall first, but the day familiar food no longer appears. 2. Dried beans. If rice keeps you alive, beans keep your body from collapsing from within. Plant protein, minerals, fiber. Those seemingly simple things become the quiet foundation that keeps the body strong enough to continue when familiar sources of nutrition gradually disappear. When combined with rice, beans create a nearly complete source of nourishment, enough for humans to survive long periods of scarcity, not to be healthy in the ideal sense, but to remain standing as living conditions grow harsher each day. Beans are not appealing, not luxurious, and in normal life, they are rarely the choice people look forward to in a meal. But in survival, appeal has never been what matters. What matters is endurance, long storage life, and the fact that it can sustain human life long enough to wait for something better to return. The history of difficult times has never been sustained by expensive meals, but by simple foods, repeated every day, enough to keep life from being broken. There is a very cold truth. The human body does not collapse the moment scarcity begins. It collapses when deprivation stretches silently across many weeks, many months. And in that long, dragging span of time, foods like dried beans become the thin boundary between exhaustion and continued survival. Not loud, not often mentioned, but enduring in a way very few other things can be. There was a family that went through many consecutive days without power in the middle of winter. The refrigerator stopped. Meat slowly spoiled. Milk had to be poured away. The things once considered the most important disappeared after only a few very quiet days. But in a corner of the kitchen, there was still a bag of dried beans that had never been noticed. No electricity needed. No refrigerator needed. Only water and time. Through the days that followed, their meals almost did not change. Only beans, repeated every day. Not delicious, not abundant, but enough so that no one collapsed. And the most frightening thing was this. If that bag of beans were also gone, they would not have another day to wait for things to return to normal. Many years later, when life had lit up again, what they remembered most about that dark time was not the cold, but the pot of beans that was still boiling. A meal does not need to be delicious. It only needs to be enough for tomorrow to still arrive. And sometimes, what carries a person through one more day is not some great hope, but simply a humble pot of beans still enough to be shared. When meat disappears, beans become what keeps people standing. Because in the harshest moments of history, what saves people is rarely something grand. It is usually very ordinary foods, but ones that remain longer than the moment when fear begins. And in true survival, the boundary between collapse and continued life is sometimes as thin as a pot of beans still boiling in a dark kitchen. 3. Canned meat animal protein is always the first thing to disappear when the supply chain stops. Not because it is rare, but because the human body needs it to maintain strength, to keep working, moving, and to keep life from deteriorating too quickly. When fresh meat is no longer stable, the true value of what was prepared in advance begins to reveal itself, not loudly, but decisively. Canned meat has been cooked, sealed, and separated from bacteria by high heat. An almost sterile environment is created inside that thin layer of metal. As long as the can remains intact, not swollen, not leaking, not destroyed, the food inside can remain safe for many years. Time may change the flavor or texture, but it cannot easily take away the energy and protein the body needs to continue surviving. In a world truly short of energy, a small can of meat is not just a meal. It is the strength to take a few more steps when the body has begun to feel as heavy as lead. It is the portion of energy that keeps the muscles from completely failing. It is the ability to remain clear-minded enough to make a correct decision in the moment when a wrong decision could cost everything. There is a very quiet truth. People rarely collapse on the first day of hunger. They collapse on the day the body no longer has the strength to stand up again. And sometimes, the distance between those 2 days is only a small remaining meal in the dark corner of a kitchen, something that seems ordinary in peacetime, but carries an entirely different meaning when everything around it changes. On a normal day, it is just canned food. On an abnormal day, it is strength. And if that day truly comes, the question is no longer whether you still have food, but whether you still have enough strength to stand up and eat it, or if it is already too late. And if you want to prepare calmly instead of panicking, subscribe to the channel right now. 4. Salt is the only thing in the kitchen that humans truly cannot live without. Not because of flavor, but because of biology. The body needs sodium to keep the heart beating, to transmit nerve signals, to maintain life at the most basic level. When every external system begins to break down, what keeps the body functioning is often not complex food, but simple minerals like salt. Throughout history, salt once held value equal to currency. Empires formed around salt trade routes. Wars broke out to control salt. Not because humans were greedy, but because they understood a cold truth. Lacking salt does not only make meals bland, it weakens life itself. When the body loses electrolyte balance, strength fades quickly, thinking slows, and the ability to endure hardship disappears before true hunger even begins. What is frightening is that salt is too cheap in peacetime, so people forget its value in times of instability. A small bag of salt can sit on a shelf for many years without spoiling, without decaying, almost unchanged. It needs no refrigeration, no complex storage. It only needs to exist, quietly, enduring, waiting for the day the world becomes more difficult. Very few simple things carry such decisive importance. In a true survival scenario, salt is not only for seasoning. It preserves food, retains water in the body, helps keep wounds cleaner, and sometimes just a small pinch is enough to pull someone through exhaustion. Small details like these are rarely mentioned on ordinary days, yet they become the fragile boundary between enduring and collapsing. On a normal day, salt is only a seasoning. On an abnormal day, salt is life in its simplest form. And when all the complexity of the modern world gradually disappears, what remains to keep humans alive is often only the small things they once never thought they would need to value. 5. Oats have never been the kind of food that makes people feel special. They do not evoke a sense of abundance, do not carry the image of lavish meals, and rarely appear in warm memories of prosperity. Yet history shows a very different truth. In humanity's most difficult periods, it is the quiet and enduring foods like oats that last the longest as other choices gradually disappear. The energy oats provide does not come in a sudden burst that quickly fades. It is released slowly, steadily, enough for the body to maintain function over many hours when food sources become limited. For bodies moving into middle age, when the heart, blood sugar, and endurance are no longer what they once were, a simple but balanced food can sometimes hold far greater value than meals rich in energy but short in duration. In a true crisis, stability is always more important than the immediate feeling of fullness. Imagine a cold morning when the world outside becomes more uncertain than usual. No good news. No sign that things will soon return to normal. In that moment, a hot bowl of oatmeal is not just food. It is a small but clear signal that life has not stopped, that the body still has enough energy to step into one more day. And sometimes, in the most fragile moments, the feeling that tomorrow still exists is what keeps a person moving forward. Oats do not save the world. They also cannot change the great upheavals happening outside. But they preserve something more important: the ability to begin again each morning. And in survival, sometimes simply holding on to that is enough to overcome the hardest part. When everything becomes unstable, what helps people remain standing is rarely something grand, but usually just a meal warm enough for tomorrow to still begin. And if you want to prepare calmly instead of panicking, subscribe to the channel right now. 6. Dried pasta is so simple that it is overlooked. No special flavor, no sense of luxury. Just dry strands of flour resting quietly on a kitchen shelf. Something that, on an ordinary day, almost no one thinks to be grateful for. Yet that very ordinariness is the reason it lasts so long when everything else gradually disappears. low moisture, durable structure, created to endure time more than to impress. When stored properly, pasta can sit there for decades with almost no change, waiting for the day when simplicity becomes the most valuable thing. In a true crisis, people do not only lack food, they lack the feeling of normalcy, the lack of a familiar meal, the lack of a small sign that life is still continuing, even though the world outside has changed so much. A pot of pasta slowly boiling in a quiet kitchen does not only provide calories, it brings back the familiar rhythm of daily life, the thing that keeps the mind from falling into panic when everything else has moved beyond control. In survival, energy helps the body keep going, but the feeling of normalcy is what keeps a person standing long enough to see tomorrow. And in many crises throughout history, the last thing remaining in an empty kitchen was often not expensive food, just a pot of pasta quietly boiling in the darkness, enough to remind that life has not ended. When the world changes completely, what helps a person realize they are still alive is sometimes only a bowl of hot pasta. In modern history, there have been periods of only a few years of turmoil, enough to take the lives of tens of millions of people. 1959 to 1961, a food crisis in China estimated to have caused 15 to 55 million people not to survive. And what is frightening is this: it did not begin with no food at all. It began with broken distribution, with false good news, with numbers on paper, while real kitchens were slowly becoming empty. So if you think it is still far from that point, that is exactly when history often repeats. The day everything still looks most normal. 7. Canned fruits and vegetables. The human body does not live on carbohydrates and protein alone. Life requires smaller things: vitamins, minerals, elements that are almost invisible on ordinary days, yet determine endurance when hardship stretches on. Vitamin deficiency does not cause people to collapse immediately. The decline comes very slowly, almost impossible to notice day by day. The body simply grows weaker. Wounds heal more slowly. Strength drains away little by little, until it is too late to reverse. That is why a can of fruit or vegetables that seems unimportant today carries an entirely different meaning during long months of scarcity. Sealed away from air, preserving the nutrients of a past harvest. Those small cans are not just food, they are what remains of the balance the body desperately needs to continue surviving. In many crises, people do not collapse from hunger first. They collapse because the body quietly loses the ability to heal itself. And when that happens, every other food source becomes not enough. A can of fruit opened in a quiet room does not only carry sweetness, it carries traces of sunlight, of harvest seasons, of a world that was once stable. The thing that reminds us life is not only survival, but also the ability to recover. In a prolonged crisis, what saves the body is not a large meal, but the small nutrients that quietly keep you alive. On some very quiet day, your answer today may become more important than you think. 8. White sugar is the purest form of energy humans can store. No bacteria can live in it. No silent decay unfolds over time. It may harden, clumping into a cold block of stone, yet its nature does not change. On an ordinary day, sugar is only what makes food a little sweeter. But in a world short of calories, where the body begins burning through its final drops of energy, a single small spoon of sugar can become the last spark that keeps the legs moving forward. Life sometimes does not depend on large meals. It depends on the body's ability to receive energy at the right moment before it is too late. The moment of trembling from exhaustion, the moment vision begins to fade, Just a little sugar can pull a person back to the fragile boundary between collapse and survival. Sugar is not luxurious, not rich in nutrition. But in survival, true value does not lie in perfection. It lies in what can keep you standing for one more day. In the moment when the body is most depleted, what saves you is sometimes only a small source of energy, arriving at the right time. 9. Honey is one of the very few foods that seems to stand outside the laws of time. Jars of ancient honey found after thousands of years are still edible, as if nature created a sweet memory that never decays. But honey's greatest value has never been only in its ability to last forever. It lies in something very few other foods can offer during crisis: a remaining gentleness in the middle of a harsh world. When days stretch on in scarcity, people are not only fighting hunger, they are fighting the slow despair that erodes the spirit. And sometimes, what keeps a person going is not another meal, but a small sign that life still holds something warm. A spoonful of honey in a cold room is not only sweetness, it is the memory of sunlight, of flowering seasons, of peaceful days once thought lost. The thing that reminds us that even when the world changes, there are still gentle things left to keep the human heart from turning to stone. In a true crisis, what saves people is not only food, but a reason to still want to live. 10. Salt does not provide many calories. It does not keep you full for long. And on an ordinary day, it is almost invisible in every meal. But when salt disappears, life itself begins to falter in a way that is very slow and very real. The human body cannot maintain electrolyte balance without salt. The heart beats irregularly. Muscles cramp. Awareness fades with each hour of exhaustion. It is not hunger that ends people the fastest in crisis. Sometimes it is only a small imbalance we never thought about. Throughout history, salt has not only been a seasoning, it was once currency, the reason for trade routes, the factor that determined the survival of entire armies and cities. Because salt can do what most other foods cannot: keep food from decaying, keep life going through winter, through drought, through periods when supply nearly stops completely. Salt does not spoil over time, because it has never lived in order to die. Hundreds of years pass, and it is still only salt, silent, enduring, unchanged. And that absolute simplicity becomes one of the quietest foundations of survival. In a world where everything can disappear, what lasts the longest is sometimes what people notice the least. At some point, you will understand that true value does not lie in what is most dazzling or most energetic. Value lies in what keeps the body functioning, strong enough to wait for tomorrow. And in the silence of crisis, a small handful of salt can become the fragile boundary between exhaustion and continued survival. What keeps people alive the longest is sometimes not the largest food, but the smallest mineral that remains when everything else has disappeared. 11. Vinegar is not something that makes you feel fully prepared. It does not give you many calories. It does not make you full. On an ordinary day, it simply sits quietly on the shelf like a secondary item. But when everything begins to slip off course, vinegar suddenly becomes one of the most practical things you may still have. Imagine a week without a refrigerator. Not an apocalyptic movie, just a prolonged power outage, food starting to spoil faster than you can use it, and the sour smell of decay creeping into the kitchen. You look at the remaining pot of food, at the vegetables beginning to soften, and understand a very cold truth. In a prolonged crisis, what kills you is not only the lack of food, but food spoiling before you can live through it. Vinegar is what slows that process down. It restrains bacteria. It helps you pickle, preserve vegetables longer, extend the usable time of things that seem about to be lost. And when you no longer have many choices to clean or handle what is dirty, vinegar becomes an invisible layer of protection between you and the spoilage advancing day by day. The most frightening thing is that vinegar is not expensive. It is not rare. But because it is so cheap and so familiar, people often forget that it is one of the very few things that can last a very long time with almost no change. Time may make it cloudier, more sedimented, but it is still vinegar. It still does exactly what it is meant to do when you need it most. In instability, you do not need many new things. You need what helps you keep what you already have. And sometimes, what carries you through the next week is not a massive store of food, but the ability to slow the collapse inside your own kitchen. In a true crisis, what saves you is rarely the strongest thing, but the thing that slows decay long enough for you to reach tomorrow. People rarely die of hunger immediately. They die when hope disappears, before the final meal. 12. Alcohol has always existed in a very strange position in human life. It is not entirely a necessity, yet it has never disappeared from history. In peacetime, alcohol is tied to celebration, to joy, to moments of gathering. But in times of instability, its role changes. It can disinfect when medicine is gone, ease pain when no other choice remains, become a medium of exchange when money no longer holds the same value. But all of that is still not the reason alcohol has endured for thousands of years. What truly keeps it present is human psychology. During long nights when the power is out, when bad news arrives slowly but never stops, when the house becomes so quiet that you can hear your own worry, a small sip of alcohol is sometimes not to escape reality, but to keep the feeling that you are still standing, still holding on to a very small part of control over life. Survival is not only keeping the body functioning. Survival is also keeping the spirit from breaking before dawn returns. And in many moments of history, what helped people keep going was not more food, but hope enough to wait for tomorrow. What kills people first is not hunger, but the moment they stop believing that tomorrow still exists. 13. Cornstarch almost never stands at the center of any survival list. It is not a primary source of energy, does not contain much protein, and is not something that makes people feel secure when looking at their supplies. In ordinary life, it is only a secondary ingredient, quietly resting in a corner of the kitchen, rarely noticed until it is truly needed. But during prolonged periods of hardship, the role of such secondary things begins to change. A little cornstarch can thicken a thin pot of soup, helping a small amount of food become warmer and easier to eat. It does not create many new calories, but it helps the body retain what it already has. And sometimes, in true survival, making the most of every small remaining portion is far more important than searching for new food sources. What is notable is that cornstarch can be stored for a very long time if kept dry. It does not require complex conditions. It does not require special technology. It only requires patience and preparation in advance. That very simplicity makes it a small but enduring part of humanity's ability to survive over time. In crisis, not everything that saves you has to be grand. Sometimes, what keeps you moving forward is only a meal warm enough, thick enough to keep the body from silently collapsing. And a chain of such small meals is how people pass through periods that once seemed impossible to survive. In the darkest moments, survival is not about living for a very long time, but about still having enough strength to step into one more day. You may never need this list, and hopefully, that is true. But history shows a very cold truth. The world does not change on the day we are ready. It changes on the day we are most complacent. If one morning everything still looks normal, but familiar choices begin to disappear very slowly, you will understand that crisis rarely has a sound. It is only a kitchen quieter than usual, a meal less than yesterday, and a very small feeling that the world will not return to what it was. When that day comes, the most important thing is not that you watched this video, but in your kitchen, what remains?